Hey everyone, this is Tim. Quick note before we get rolling on this episode with the sound team from The Bear. On August 24th, Tonebenders is doing our second sound design meetup in London, England, presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. Last year was so much fun, and an incredible amount of people turned out for a great night. I have booked a bit bigger pub this year, so hopefully everyone will fit in this time. So if you will be in the London area on August 24th, head down to the Crown and Two Chairmen in Soho for 7 p.m. Hang out with the sound community, see old friends and colleagues, and hopefully meet a bunch of new ones. If you come out, make sure you track me down and say hi. It would be great to meet as many people as I can that night. After the wild success of the Los Angeles Sound Design Meetup earlier this year, the ball's in your court, London. Let's make this an even better night. Okay, let's talk about The Bear.
Doors!
Doors!
Doors! Doors!
Fire 6 clam, 1 no egg.
Yes, chef.
Fire 2 carrot. Marcus, need to walk the 6 panna cotta, chef.
Yes, chef. I'm almost there.
Welcome to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. Check out Extension 12 of the iconic General Series 6000 library, Sound Ideas' most popular sound effects collection. This newest edition features over 2,500 high-quality recordings over a wide range of sounds for both the fantastical and the realistic, including noises of nature, industrial sounds, magical creatures, and lots more. Available in 4 resolutions with descriptive metadata in UCS formatting. Head over to sound-ideas.com to learn more. Hello and welcome to Tonebenders. I'm your host for today, Timothy Muirhead, and I'm excited today that I get to talk about one of my personal favorite shows, The Bear. Way back in 2022, I was lucky enough to talk with the sound team behind The Bear when Season 1 had just come out back in Tonebenders 198. So I'm excited to do a follow-up now that Season 4 has been released and talk about the evolution of the show and how it's grown in popularity and especially in scope. We're recording today just after the Emmy nominations have been announced, so The Bear was recognized in both Outstanding Sound Editing and Outstanding Sound Mixing. It's really amazing. Congratulations, that's great news. Let me introduce my guests today. First up, we have the re-recording mixer and supervising sound editor, Steve Giammaria, who goes by the handle Major. It's great to have you back on Tonebenders, Major. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Tim. Glad to be back.
Excellent. We also have the show's dialogue editor, Evan Benjamin. I think a lot of the recognition of The Bear that it's garnered through how great its sound is comes from how clear and crisp the dialogue is. So it'll be great to dig into that with you today, Evan. Glad to have you back on the show. Great to see you.
Nice to see you, Tim. I'm glad to be back.
And finally, we have a first-time guest on the show, Scott D. Smith, the show's production sound mixer. Scott is a 2-time Oscar nominee, a BAFTA winner, and his experience must have been heavily leaned on to get the chaotic world of a restaurant kitchen captured cleanly, just to give the Post team a fighting chance. It's great to have you on the show, Scott. Nice to meet you.
Good to be here.
Since Scott was not present for the first time we talked, maybe we can focus on the work that he's done on the series to start us off today. Scott, can you talk about what your setup is on a regular shoot day inside the restaurant kitchen?
On the stage set, which is where we are with it now, that's not where it was initially. We have a pretty extensive setup that we normally use on stage. There are 2 different cart setups that we have. One which can accommodate 12 inputs, a second one which can accommodate 16 inputs. They're different consoles and they have slightly different features and functions that we can use. So might be doing a scene with 1 actor, we might be doing a scene with 16 actors. We just, they kind of show up sometimes just out of the ether unexpectedly. So we try and be ready for whatever might happen.
And what are you using in terms of booms versus lavs? Is everyone laved up? How many booms you have up in the air?
Typically, everyone is laved unless the outfits won't accommodate it for some reason. But usually everyone is laved. They may or may not be very good. We always try and get a mic on the actors when we can. Multiple booms, 3 booms is not unusual. Our regular show crew is minimum 2 boom operators, 1 utility, and myself. When we got to episode 7 of this past season, we were up to 8-person sound crew.
Wow.
It does vary depending on what we think we're going to be walking into, but we might have plant mics, always have boom mics going, even if we can't get them where we'd like to have them. Sometimes there's a lot of coverage with mics. Sometimes there's only one mic. Kind of depends on what we can get in there.
Evan, as a dialogue editor, do you want to talk about the tracks as they arrive to you?
This stuff shows up and it's always in pristine condition. Sometimes when the editors work on it, some of the stuff gets, the assembly sometimes gets a little confused, but it's pretty easy to figure out what Scott's done. I usually drop all the production audio into SoundMiner. I make a database, and that's a much easier way for me of going through. Especially if you have the pro version, you can pick out the legs of a multi-track wave pretty easily and just pick and choose. In that wedding scene that is in episode 7, he gave me 32 tracks, a record for me by far. I don't know what it is for other people, but I don't think he's ever given me more than 16. It's kind of funny because SoundMiner opened up and it was this giant display, but it couldn't show all the mics. So you had to look for some little weird icon that I've never seen before that allowed me to toggle to the next page to see a few more microphones. And those were labeled a little bit more. They were just sort of generic labels because there's so many of them, table 1 or whatever they call them. So that one was more of a hunt and peck exercise that you had to go searching for. But once you got the logic of it, I think it was pretty obvious. If somebody's at one end of this long table, if anyone's seen the scene, there's as many as, 12, 14, 15, almost the whole cast is under this table talking. And Scott has arranged microphones to go on the underside of the table as booms, as replacement for real booms, because nobody could get a boom under there effectively. So the actors are all wearing lavs, which sometimes were useful, but mostly it was these mics that were sort of hanging over each position under the table. And as the actors move their heads, you might use one mic over another mic. There was a lot of data, but the point of what he does is that there's always some way to grab the line. And it means a lot of searching, but you're always going to find it.
We don't normally get to have the full kind of dialogue chain represented in an interview like this. So Major, Scott's capturing them on set, Evan's cutting it up, cleaning it up, and then it gets to you on the faders.
That's what's great about TV is multiple seasons. If you're lucky enough, multiple seasons. So on a film, if I find a problem or I want to give feedback to the production mixer, they're long gone. So, you don't get that. So after season 1, Scott and I became friendly, and now there's an open dialogue between the three of us, which is really helpful. Scott does an amazing job, but, there's things like, oh, hey, you don't need to spend political capital on this, maybe focus on this, that sort of thing. Honestly, by the time I get it between Scott and Evan, it plays for sure. The multiple booms is great. So I'll start with booms only. Evan has made choices where he thinks lavs are needed to support that, but I'll run, 1 or 2 booms. And then, if people are off mic, kind of support it with the lav. So it's more of it's almost like a wet dry with the boom and the lav a lot of times, because I don't run just everything because that would be unnecessary. It's kind of do no harm first. So if the boom sounds good without the lav, great. If it's a little off mic and needs a little help, then I'll bring up the lav a little bit, and it helps, especially in those chaotic scenes. You want that. If you went all lav, I think it would feel pretty weird. So we try and avoid that. We try and avoid that because you want that chaos. You need that movement and that energy. So I think I said this last time I was on. I don't know what this show would sound like without auto align and being able to run a boom and a lav at the same time, or 2 booms and 6 lavs or whatever it is.
Scott does this 2 boom thing that I guess I don't see very often, where just even in scenes with just a few people or even 2 people, he might put a boom on either end of them. So as they're facing each other, I'm getting the sort of direct sound. I'm not getting anybody's off axis sound. It's just a great way to work, I think.
The style of the show helps. There's rarely a wide shot. It's maybe a medium 2 shot is kind of the widest thing we ever get. So yeah, that helps Scott being able to rock a couple more booms, which is great.
Even though it doesn't make it into the edit, there's almost always a wide camera going that I try to talk them out of. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. The other reason typically that I try to do multiple booms is there's frequently a lot of overlapping dialogue. Even though it might be one actor on camera, if they're talking to another actor, they may end up overlapping. It gives us the opportunity to maybe get some wild lines for another shot of the scene that can be dropped in. We try to gather everything we can. We typically don't get a lot of takes on the show.
There's an overlap. I can save an overlap from using like one syllable from one microphone and then switch over. And maybe it doesn't match perfectly, but Major will take care of that. But what's more important is that you save that overlap, because the problem is if you have to get a bunch of people in to do ADR and recreate that, it just would never really have that same feel. So we try to do that. But because he has so much stuff happening, very often I can get around that overlap business. Or if I want to hit something hard with some noise reduction for just a syllable of an overlap, it'll work better if I use a mic with the most amount of off axis from the other microphone, the one I want to get rid of. So if it was all coming off of one boom, that would be very difficult. So sometimes I can get away with it with his technique, which makes everything a little bit more isolated. And, we have these tools, but the tools aren't 100%. So whatever you can do to help them, meaning a microphone that has a little bit less signal from the thing you want to get rid of, that's going to be helpful.
On the various animated series I work on, we get the finished picture delivery a day before the final playback with clients. For a long time, I would put up the new picture and then all of the premix audio, and I would watch it through really closely, like a hawk, to see if anything had changed. Inevitably, every now and again, I would miss something in the background that's moved by 7 frames or a character's mouth that is now closed. And then when we were doing the playback, the director would have to stop and point out a fix. It's not an ideal way of working. Now I use Matchbox Change Management tool from the Cargo Cult to quickly run a comparison between the 2 versions of the picture, and Matchbox will notice everything that is different and flag all the changes for me. This not only saves me time, it saves the whole crew time, as everything is all ready to go and allows for fewer notes during playback. It also reduces my stress significantly, as my confidence is high that I have a mix fully ready to play for the clients. And that's just a small portion of what Matchbox can do, especially now that Matchbox 2 is out. Its new intelligent image matching is particularly amazing. It can match shots even if they have had significant visual changes, like the entire background's replaced or extreme color grading. On the other end of the scale, the new diffing mode can detect differences down to the change of a single pixel. Using the follow DAW mode, you can see both versions of picture rolling in real time, easily showing you what has changed. Reconforming in Pro Tools with Matchbox 2 is now much faster and more reliable. The Smart Conform mode performs the reconform on a clip-by-clip basis, maintaining head and tail fades, leaving less of a cleanup job for the editor. The Cargo Cult's Matchbox 2 reveals the differences, reports on the damage, and then retimes your sound mix, saving you incalculable amounts of time. There are too many additions and improvements with Matchbox 2 for me to even mention here, so head over to thecargocult.nz or go to the link in the episode description in your player app to learn more about Matchbox 2 and pull down the free 15-day trial. Matchbox 2 is exactly what you've been waiting for. Spend your time being creative and let Matchbox handle the conforming. So I was wondering if we could maybe take a few specific scenes and break them down a little bit. One of them is going to be the scene under the table in the wedding episode. But the first one I want to bring up, there's a scene where basically every character in the entire show is in the office staring at the wall behind the camera. And they're packed in shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. I have a feeling like lavs wouldn't really work because they'd be hitting the lavs with each other's shoulders and stuff. But also every character is throwing out one-liners, and it feels fairly improv-y, like you can't really plan who's going to talk next. Scott, do you want to talk about how you captured the dialogue in that scene, and then maybe we can move along to Evan?
That scene was definitely tricky. That office, it's a 4-wall set. It was packed in there. I think we had one mic working underneath and another one up top. This is a situation where if the lavs don't work, having boom operators that can second guess what the actors are going to do is a huge advantage. Years ago, when I was doing a film up in New York, I had a boom operator who was also an actor. He was great because he could kind of anticipate just by facial movements, things like that, if an actor might go up on their line. So he could try to anticipate it, grab something that we would have gotten otherwise. So Having good boom ops in a situation like that is really important, especially if that's all you're going to have. The laws in there worked a little bit. Part of the problem with the laws in that scene is you get that much RF jammed together in a small space like that, even at low power. You're fighting a lot of intermod issues. I think that was a little bit of a problem in there with a couple of the mics. That was a tricky one.
It's interesting because I think to 99.999% of the people watching the show, they would just think that's a simple shot. Like they're all just standing still, no big whoop. And then I'm imagining that the technical end of that was probably pretty complicated. So thanks for talking through it a little bit.
Because I'm listening to the production all the time, and I assume it's Chris Storer, whoever else is directing a particular episode. Definitely hear a lot of guys, got people shouting out random stuff for people to try. So before the editors cut it up, I'm sure that scene was people just running over each other, trying stuff, stopping and go, no, you do this first. Let's try that again, but you do this first. And then chaos. But by the time I'm saying these editors do some significant amount of work before we get it. And sometimes that makes new problems for us, like when they do overlaps. But in this case, I seem to remember that scene being pretty tidy.
How did that scene work for you on the faders?
Yeah, by the time it got to me, if I remember, I feel like there was a pretty good boom. All of the tertiary characters were kind of covered by the boom, which was good. I think they had lavs on them, but yeah, it wasn't so bad. But I get what you're saying about, like, the average viewer would be like, oh, that's an easy scene. That's how I felt about the scene under the table, is like, oh yeah, it's like 8 people sitting on the ground. Like that can't be that tough. But just with the nature of lavs and, you can't get a boom in there. Scott gave us 32 channels because he was smart enough and experienced enough to be like, oh, this is going to be a problem. Let's think ahead. Scott, go over what you did. You said you drilled some holes in the table and you had a whole situation, right?
That setup was a whole process. Initially, when I got drawings from the art department, I thought that the table was just going to be kind of a prop, looking at the entire table in the background with the actors outside the table. Then we'd move right into the shot under the table. Fortunately, there were basically 2 tables, one which was dressed for the shots that we see up top the table, and then a separate table that was higher that was used to shoot underneath.
Scott, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 sec. Just set it up for anyone that hasn't seen this episode yet. The plot calls for one of our main characters, Richie. His daughter is scared at this wedding. She's going to have to dance and she's really scared. So she's hiding under a table. So slowly over the course of the show, a new character joins her under the table to try and lure her out until almost our entire cast is under this table.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a regular wedding table. It's kind of like a buffet table. So it's a very long table.
Yeah.
And there's a tablecloth going down the sides on both ends. So when you're under the table, you can't see the rest of the wedding. You can still hear it.
Right.
So sorry, I just wanted to paint the picture for anyone that hadn't seen it yet. So
Yeah.
So the problem with that scene is obviously normally when you're booming from above.
Yeah.
But there's a table above, so you can't do that. So how did you solve that problem?
So the problem is with the table set up for the shots underneath the table, even though it was a little bit higher than the table used for the outside of that, the actors' heads were hitting the top of the table. So there were some tight shots where my one pretty agile boom op was able to get underneath and boom from underneath on some of the tighter shots so we could get the mic in. But that was about the only time we could get a boom in. So, I realized early on going into it, when I looked at the setup, realistically, we didn't think we'd be able to get a boom in there. So I didn't want to have to depend on just lives. You got people crawling around, running into each other, they're crouched over. So laws weren't really going to play too well. And I've done setups similar to that where we've typically used PZM mics that work pretty well, but we couldn't use those underneath this because
you'd see them
in the wide shots. They're going to see underneath the table. So the only thing that I could see working was actually taking some small lavalier mics, isolating them, drilling holes in the table, and aging them down so that they'd match the texture of the underside of the table. And the art department wasn't too happy about that when I approached them on it initially. But I said, well, let me do a mock-up so you can see it. And we needed to test it. So the first mock-up, we had about 5 different microphones that we did comparisons on. about a 2 foot by 2 foot board with a bunch of holes drilled in it, and the mics mounted in it.
Like different mic models, you mean?
Right. Yeah. So we recorded some dialogue, with a few different people on my crew to get a sense of how it would work on various voices. In the end, we ended up with DPA mics primarily because I needed 16 microphones that were the same model. I think we had about 10 in our inventory, but I needed 6 more. And at the time, there weren't a lot of mics available off the shelf. So we had to do some rooting around to come up with, I think we actually had 8 more mics that we could get our hands on in a short time period. So that was in large part what drove the decision to go that route. We obviously wanted wired mics. We didn't want to be dealing with wireless underneath there. So once we did the demo test and we showed the art department how we could age it down, they finally reluctantly agreed. So we drilled a bunch of holes in the primary table, mounted the mics. Paint department came in, aged them all down. And I don't think there's a single shot you see in the show that you can see those mics in there.
I was looking for them. I couldn't see them.
They were hidden pretty well. So the big problem for Evan is that, you've got actors moving around underneath there. So whereas I would normally assign a mic to a character, that doesn't work because they're moving all over the place.
Every time a new person arrived, everybody shifted around to make room for them. So, yeah.
Basically, what I did was I gave him kind of a zone map of the table showing where all the mics were, so that if he's looking at a shot, he might be able to kind of second guess, okay, they're on mic 3, or maybe they move slightly to the left. Now they're on another mic. My hope was that he at least had a little bit of a roadmap as to where to find things. But you can't really tell, especially on the tighter shots, exactly where somebody is.
The truth is, by the time I got the AAF, things got a little scrambled there, I think, because editorial was confronting so many microphones that I think they dropped a few, and I'd have to figure out what they dropped. So my strategy, I just kind of went through shot by shot and figured out what sounded best literally for each line. But after a while, you kind of figure out, that it's a long, absurdly long, because there's so many people under it, which means that at one end, mics 1 through whatever are not going to get this guy at this end of the table. So that's going to be roughly these numbers. And frankly, you just look at, those are the fattest waveforms. Let me check those. I mean, it's not that hard, You can look at all of them and you can see, there's no signal on those, and those 6 have a lot. So let's see what those sound like. And usually you'd find something. Just one movement of an actor's head could determine, I think, what was going to happen. And it could sound pretty radically different as they moved around, much more so, I think, than in an open, normal room. Probably the first time I've ever done an under-the-table scene that takes place completely. Probably the only time I'll ever do that, under the table with like 16 people.
Yeah.
And Evan, how are you dealing with the organization in your session of your tracks when people are moving around like that?
My strategy with that stuff is, when I do a boom, I don't do one per character and I was treating those table mics like booms. I was trying to keep it as one unified, because to me, it sounds like you're supposed to just kind of keep everything until it sounds different. In this case, maybe there was a little bit more variation, but I would just split it up by character for the lav. So each character's lav was on a separate track, but I think I was trying to make one kind of cohesive track. In this case, it might take 4 or 5 to kind of go between them with tone fill and such. But I guess I don't subscribe to the notion in general that you split by character when you're doing something with booms. I feel like you split by sound, right? Because if the character sounds different from one shot to the next, why would you put them on the same track? That just makes things harder for the mixer. That's my mentality. That's how I approach things. It should be sort of organized by sound and not by character. But with lavs, you don't have any choice. They all are going to sound the same, every one of their lines. So that you do by character. So I ended up with quite a few. Yeah, there were a lot of tracks. But most of them were muted because in that scene, I don't think I used, I don't know, Major can maybe remember it better than I can, but I don't think I used many lavs.
I was kind of interested as to how you could organize that whole thing. Back in the day when we were doing everything on 35 mag and you don't have the luxury of like 300 channels or something. Typically, the dialogue editors, if there were a couple of mics involved, they might have one track of boom per character and another track of lavs. But when you get this many going, that's a real mess to try to.
It wasn't so bad. I mean, I usually run 24 or 32 tracks of dialogue anyway, just in my dialogue section. So yeah, that scene went a little wide, but it wasn't crazy. I mean, by the time Evan wrangled it, it was fine. It was really only like, 4 booms or something. Yeah.
Each line is going to have 2 tracks that I have running, and I'm going to probably mute one of them. That's how it, even though there's 32 tracks, by the time it's done, each line of these actors is going to be 1 or maybe 2 if I'm going to auto line. And so it's not like there's that much data. It's just I spread it so that I'm trying to have him look at it, and having not talked to me, understand what's happening just by looking at it. That's
communicate
sort of
through your editing. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Major, when you get the tracks up on your faders, Under a Table, did it sound really boxy? And if it did, do you lean into that or do you fight that?
If I remember correctly, there was like a weird kind of node at maybe 5 something. There was kind of like a little boxiness, like 550 or something that I took out. But yeah, you're hearing that reflection between the floor and the ceiling, and just the boxiness of it. And it's fine. They're under a table. So, it is, they're not supposed to be out in a field or in a cathedral. So let it be boxy.
It's kind of an amazing scene because it solves a lot of problems in one scene. So there's the conflict between the daughter and the stepfather, the conflict between the father and the stepfather, the conflict between Carm and Claire, and then accepting the other character's new girlfriend. And like, there's just all these relationships that all get glued together in one scene and then get represented by the picture they take at the end of it. The whole episode wraps up looking at that picture as this like kind of shining moment. It's a really, really well-written scene that obviously we have to hear what everybody's saying. And it was crystal clear when I was watching it. Like, that scene works so well.
sort of the idea of the bear. What people think about it now is this idea of all these people in the room shouting at each other. But here's a scene which I think tied in with the season as well, being a little bit more sort of resolving their differences to some degree. They're doing this classic bear scene, except instead of everybody shouting at each other, they're all getting along and trying to solve the problems of a little girl. And then they succeed. So that's kind of a brilliant counterpoint to the stereotypical bear scene of anger or tension or stress. And it's kind of nice to see.
Well, that's an interesting point, because in season 1, when they're in the kitchen and cooking, everybody's yelling everything, which creates its own chaos, its own energy. But due to the plot of the show, by season 4, they're in a fine dining establishment. You can't have the kitchen screaming at each other while people are on the other side of the wall having romantic, quiet dinners.
Well, those quieter scenes are a little more difficult. I mean,
Definitely.
there's nowhere to hide. I mean, when you're doing the classic bear, everybody's yelling. Evan has a harder job, but like, I'm just kind of along for the ride. Like, I got to make sure everything's heard, but you can hide a lot of sins in that cacophony. If it's Carmy and Claire whispering into each other's mouths, it's just like there's not a lot going on to hide. So that's got to be, that's also harder for Evan. It's got to be clean, but not too clean. And then, we have those conversations that you have of like, where are they? What's it like outside? But you don't want to have, horns honking everywhere. So there's quite a bit of, in season 3 and, the episode that starts with Marcus eulogizing his mom, we're just kind of sitting in that, that silence of the church, but boy, it's not silent. Like, there's a lot going on there. There's several tracks of sound design that our sound designers, John Fuhrer, Matt Snedker, and Craig LaJudas provided us of just, it's that deep silence, or the detailed silence, I guess we could call it, of, you got the people coughing and shuffling and sniffing and all of that. It really brings a lot of depth to a scene like that. And then Marcus gets up and gives his beautiful speech. And even that, I mean, thank you, Scott, for plugging in the microphone that he's actually talking into. That's very helpful.
That was actually the mic that was there, and I was going to try and swap it out with another one, but because of the way the podium was rigged, I couldn't do it.
The amount of times I've mixed a scene where the character is talking into a microphone that's not plugged in fills me with a rage. He's talking into a microphone, plug it in. It just looks like a 58 on a stand, yeah. But I'm just like, okay, he's right there. It's a mic in front of his mouth. But anyway,
I love using practical mics like that.
You have to. So thanks, Scott. Yeah, and there's those NA meetings with those long monologues from either a guest actor or Jeremy. You want to feel the people there, but not be distracted by them. So often at the top, there will be a lot of shuffling, and you'll hear outside, and then we'll just, as we're zooming in on them, as we're getting into their story, all of that kind of falls away, and you're just left with them and their voice. And we really do analyze every little like mouth noise and stuff. Like, do we want to take that out? Do we want to lower it? I mean, in season 4, there's that scene with Jeremy and Odenkirk in season 4.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, in the wedding episode.
There's two things. They're playing with the gum wrapper, and they're also both chewing gum. So my mix tech, Maeve, and I went through that scene probably for an hour and a half, analyzing every gum chew and deciding whether we should keep it from production, add Foley to it, because the Foley team covered every single one, because they were using like gum chewing to like punctuate their points. It was like a little musical. So yeah, there was, we kind of go through those quiet scenes of like, okay, do we really need to hear Jeremy faffing around with the bubble?
That rapper drove me crazy. I was ready to go up there and grab it out of his hand.
Oh, I know. They love business. But it's also like, it kind of was part of the thing. He's nervous. He's talking to this guy that he's unsure of. All of those things we consider, especially in those quiet scenes. If they're screaming at each other, then we're just, make sure it's heard and try and give it some depth. And it's really fun digging into some of those quiet scenes.
Sometimes for those things, I'll tone out the noisy stuff and put the noisy stuff on another track and lower it and leave it. You can either remove it, you can play it lower, or you can leave it as is. And when everything is put together, maybe there's a decision that, I like all that gum wrapping and makes them seem like they're having a tense moment, because they were. But at some moment, it's like, wow, guys, you've really worked on that prop. Maybe you can just put it down now.
Yeah.
Maybe just settle down, guys.
In season 4, there is a lot of needle drop music. And it's not obscure needle drop music. It's like really famous songs.
I don't do a lot to the music. It's mostly just real delicate fader moves. They also like just drop the song and let it play a lot of times. So there's not a lot of like, I tried in early seasons, like, hey, can we not have the chorus come in when they're like emoting, when there's dialogue, and they're like, nope, we want to just have it play. So which I'm like, all right. So occasionally I'll kind of dip some EQ out of the dialogue range just to make sure things are clear, because dialogue is the important thing. We want to make sure that's heard. I don't get fancy with, I don't have duckers or spectral dipping and cue that like people I feel like get way too complicated on the music, when it's just like you just got a fader and maybe a little EQ and just tuck it around everything. But I mean, it's surgical. You're mixing around syllables and pushing up the dialogue, and
because that's the complicated thing. You're doing the complicated thing. Using the other stuff is a way of people getting around doing faders. I think people are a little timid about that sometimes.
If you can make it work either way, I can never make those techniques work very well
because they're too automatic. There's no finesse in those things.
I mean, I don't want to, if you get good results with it, I don't want to shit on your techniques. I can't personally make it work, so it's just fader and EQ, and very occasionally I'll see if they can adjust and edit, but that's usually a non-starter, especially with a lot of these. They're like, well, everybody knows that the drum intro of this REM song sounds like this. You can't add some beats to it. Like, that just doesn't work. But they edit with this music in mind. So we're not adjusting like, oh, we got to make sure it hits on the cut. Like, they'll adjust the cut to the song because it's very important to them. And I mean, that's the thing with the show, is like everything is open until the end. Like, there's no like, let's lock episode 1 and work on episode 2. Everything is kind of fluid. We work on unlocked cuts all the time now, and we plan for it. So it's, there's a procedure in place. But, if a music cue changes, you better bet the picture's probably going to change too, which is fine. And that's the way it should be. I mean, that's modern technology. We can go back and forth with editorial a couple of times and it's not a disaster.
At the end of season 4, I said to Craig, actually, I feel like the entire season's been put into a blender and then put back. I got no idea I couldn't even remember what episode was in what, because they would move things around so much. And to actually watch it, I had to watch it for real on TV later to actually understand what was happening.
There's one scene I won't talk about specifics, but that has been in no less than probably 4 or 5 episodes across 2 seasons, and it keeps getting cut.
Wow.
What I really like about the conforms, I'll tell you something I do like about working on a scene more than once, is it's interesting to watch the choices that are made by people I think are extremely skillful. Those editors are really very highly skilled people. And watching a scene or an episode get honed over and over again, you may not want to have to go revisit it and reconform. Nobody enjoys doing that, but it is interesting to watch. 99% of the time they would do something and go, wow, that is sure better. You made it tighter, you made it better, you made it funnier, whatever you did, that's better than the first time I had it, or the second time I had it, or the third time I had it. But yeah, it's better.
Yeah, every time it gets better. Yeah, that's Joanna Nagel, Megan Mancini, Adam Epstein, the brilliant edit team on The Bear.
Right.
And they're A's as well.
Thanks for talking to me today. Congratulations on both the Emmy nominations. As I said at the beginning, The Bear is either my favorite show on TV or one of my favorite shows. I love it. I love that it's changed so much over the years. Like season 1 was special for the way it was. It's loud, it's chaotic. And season 4, it feels like a different animal, but what holds it together is how much I care about all the characters in the show. I look forward to what's coming in the future, and thank you very much for talking to me today, and hopefully we can have you back on soon.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listeners in England, mark your calendars for Sunday, August 24th for the Tonebenders London Sound Design Meetup presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. See you there, everyone. Check out Extension 12 of the iconic General Series 6000 library, Sound Idea's most popular sound effects collection. This newest edition features over 2,500 high-quality recordings over a wide range of sounds for both the fantastical and the realistic, including noises of nature, industrial sounds, magical creatures, and lots more. Available in 4 resolutions with descriptive metadata in UCS formatting. Head over to sound-ideas.com to learn more. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues. Or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support. Thanks for listening.